The smell of cumin and charred peppers still clung to my apron as I pulled into the commissary kitchen parking lot at 5:47 a.m. Another 14-hour day stretched ahead of me, prepping for 3 food trucks that would serve nearly 2,000 customers across Los Angeles. The rhythm had become second nature after 8 years. Arrive before dawn, prep the proteins, mix the sauces, load the trucks, and supervise the crews until the last customer was served. My name is Carlos Mendoza, and I built Hermanos Food Trucks from a single borrowed cart into the most successful mobile food operation in Southern California. What started as a desperate attempt to feed my family after losing my restaurant job had evolved into a 7-truck empire serving authentic Oaxacan cuisine at festivals, corporate events, and street corners from Santa Monica to East LA. Most people saw me as just another guy slinging tacos from a truck window. They didn't know about the culinary degree from the Culinary Institute of America, the years I'd spent perfecting recipes passed down from my grandmother, or the food science knowledge I'd used to develop signature sauces that had food critics comparing my trucks to high-end restaurants. What really set Hermanos apart wasn't just the food, it was the innovation. I'd spent 3 years developing a unique fermentation process for my salsas that created flavors no one else could replicate. My mole recipe used 23 ingredients in precise ratios that I'd calculated through hundreds of test batches. The meat marinades incorporated molecular gastronomy techniques I'd learned working under James Beard Award winners. But the most important thing I'd done was protect it all legally. Every signature recipe, every proprietary technique, every sauce blend was protected by patents filed through my attorney's office. I'd learned that lesson the hard way after watching other chefs have their innovations stolen by larger competitors. As I unlocked the commissary kitchen, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister Isabella. Need to talk. Coming by this morning. Important family business. Isabella and I had built Hermanos together, or so I'd thought. She joined me 3 years ago when the business was struggling to expand, bringing what she called business expertise to complement my culinary skills. What she'd actually brought was charm, ambition, and a law degree she'd never mentioned using for anything other than intimidating suppliers and landlords. I taught her everything about the food business, how to read profit margins, manage inventory, deal with health inspectors, and most importantly, how to maintain the quality standards that separated us from every other taco truck in the city. She'd been a quick learner, maybe too quick. The commissary kitchen was a cathedral of stainless steel and industrial equipment where I conducted my daily rituals. 6 gas ranges, 3 convection ovens, 2 massive refrigeration units, and enough prep space to supply a small restaurant. I designed the layout myself, optimizing every square foot for efficiency. I was halfway through preparing the carnitas when Isabella arrived, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. She wore a sharp business suit that looked expensive, her black hair pulled back in the severe style she'd adopted since finishing law school. In her hands was a leather briefcase that looked new. "Carlos," she said, setting the briefcase on the prep counter with deliberate precision. "We need to discuss the future of Hermanos." I continued seasoning the pork shoulder, not looking up. "What about it?" "I've been reviewing our partnership agreement," she said, opening the briefcase, "and I've discovered some irregularities." Something in her tone made me pause. Isabella had always been ambitious, but there was something different now, a coldness that reminded me of the prosecutors I'd watched on television. "What kind of irregularities?" I asked. She pulled out a folder thick with documents. Discrepancies in the ownership structure. Questions about who actually holds controlling interest in the business. I set down my knife and turned to face her. "Isabella, what are you talking about?" We're 50-50 partners. We've been through this 100 times. Her smile was sharp enough to cut citrus. Actually, brother, I think you'll find the situation is more complicated than that. She spread several documents across the prep counter, her manicured nails tapping against the stainless steel. These are the original incorporation papers for Hermanos Food Trucks LLC. Notice anything interesting? I leaned over to examine the papers, recognizing my signature on several pages. But as I read more carefully, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The ownership percentages weren't 50-50 as I remembered. According to these documents, Isabella held 65% of the company. This is wrong, I said immediately. I never signed anything giving you majority control. Isabella's smile widened. Are you sure about that? Because your signature is right there, witnessed and notarized. I grabbed the papers, studying them more closely. The signatures looked authentic, but I clearly remembered negotiating equal partnership. These have been altered. That's a serious accusation, Carlos. I hope you have proof. The way she said it made it clear she knew I didn't. I'd been so focused on building the business that I trusted family to handle the legal paperwork. A mistake that was now staring me in the face with my own forged signature. What do you want? I asked quietly. Isabella walked over to where I had been preparing the carnitas, running her finger along the edge of the prep table. I want what's mine. Full control of Hermanos Food Trucks. Full control. You can stay on as head chef, she said magnanimously. I'm not unreasonable, but the business decisions, the expansion plans, the financial management, that all needs to be handled by someone with actual business training. I stared at her, this woman I'd taught to dice onions, who'd learned to balance spice levels by watching me work 18-hour days. Isabella, I built this business from nothing, and I've grown it into something profitable, she replied. But we've reached the limits of what your approach can accomplish. It's time for professional management. She reached into her briefcase again and pulled out another set of documents. These are transfer papers. Sign them, and you can continue doing what you do best, cooking. Refuse, and I'll be forced to exercise my majority ownership rights anyway. I looked at the papers, then back at my sister. You planned this. I prepared for this, she corrected. There's a difference. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units and the distant sound of traffic beginning to build outside. I thought about the years I'd spent building Hermanos, the early mornings, the rejected loan applications, the nights I'd stayed up developing recipes while Isabella was in law school. You always were the dumb one, Carlos, Isabella said, her voice taking on the tone she used when we were children and she'd gotten me in trouble with our parents. I've got lawyers. You've got grease stains. The casual cruelty of it hit me like a physical blow. But instead of anger, I felt something else. A cold clarity I'd learned from years of managing high-pressure kitchen situations. I walked to the key rack near the door and removed 7 sets of truck keys, each marked with the name of one of our locations. Isabella watched me with satisfaction as I placed them on the prep counter next to her documents. Take them, I said quietly. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Just like that? You want the business. You've got it. I signed the transfer papers without reading them, my signature steady despite the betrayal burning in my chest. Isabella gathered the documents with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment for months. You're making the right choice, she said, but I detected a note of surprise in her voice. She'd expected a fight. I know, I replied. What Isabella didn't know was that she just signed papers taking ownership of 7 food trucks, 3 commissary kitchens, and a customer database. What she didn't own were the recipes, the proprietary techniques, or the trade secrets that made Hermanos successful. Because 5 years ago, acting on advice from my intellectual property attorney, I'd filed patents on every significant recipe and cooking process we used. The fermentation method for my salsas, the precise blend of spices in my mole, the molecular gastronomy techniques I'd adapted for food truck service, even the specific temperatures and timing for my carnitas preparation. All of it was protected under my name, not the business name. Isabella now owned a fleet of trucks that legally couldn't serve the food that made them successful. After she left, keys and documents in hand, I sat in the empty commissary kitchen and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes of grief. Not for the business, I could build another one, but for the sister I thought I knew, who just revealed herself to be someone I'd never really understood. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. "Patricia," I said when she answered. "It's Carlos. I need to discuss licensing agreements for my food patents." "I was wondering when you'd call," she said. "I heard through the grapevine that there might be some changes at Hermanos. Isabella took over the business today, used forged documents to claim majority ownership." There was a pause. "And the patents? Still mine. All of them." "Then she's about to have a very expensive education in intellectual property law." The first signs of trouble appeared within a week. Isabella had immediately started improving operations, bringing in consultants and efficiency experts who didn't understand the delicate balance of flavors that made our food special. She'd also fired 3 of our most experienced cooks, replacing them with cheaper labor. By the second week, I started getting calls from longtime customers complaining about the food quality. The carnitas were overcooked. The salsa verde lacked the complex fermented tang that had made it famous. The mole tasted flat and one-dimensional. "Carlos," said Miguel Ramirez, who ran a construction company that had been ordering lunch for his crews for 3 years. "What happened to the food? My guys are saying it tastes like every other truck." I explained that I was no longer involved in day-to-day operations, which was technically true. What I didn't mention was that Isabella's new cooks were trying to reverse engineer my recipes without understanding the science behind them. On Thursday of the 3rd week, I received a call from Derek Chen, the food critic for Le Weekly, who'd written the review that had launched Hermanos into citywide recognition. "Carlos, I need to ask you something," Derek said. "I ate at your truck yesterday, and the food was different. Not bad exactly, but not the same. Has something changed?" "New management," I said carefully. "The mole especially. It tasted like someone had tried to recreate it from memory, but missed some key component. That's perceptive." "Are you still involved with the business?" I looked out the window of my apartment, where I'd been spending my days developing new recipes and planning my next move. "Not anymore." Derek was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry to hear that. The food scene in LA needs more people like you." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to my attorney. It was time for the next phase. The legal papers were served to Isabella on a Tuesday morning while she was at the main commissary kitchen trying to figure out why her food costs had increased by 30% while quality had decreased. According to my contact at the kitchen, Maria, who'd worked with me since the beginning, Isabella's face went white as she read the cease and desist order. The document was comprehensive and devastating. It detailed every patent I held on the recipes and processes that defined Hermanos Food Trucks, the fermentation method for the salsas, the specific spice blend ratios for the mole, the marination techniques for the carnitas, even the precise temperature controls for the cooking process. All of it was legally protected intellectual property that belonged to Carlos Mendoza, not Hermanos Food Trucks LLC. The order gave Isabella 48 hours to stop using any of the patented recipes or face federal charges for intellectual property theft. It also demanded immediate payment of licensing fees for the unauthorized use that had already occurred, calculated at fair market value for a business generating over $2 million annually. Isabella called me within an hour. "Carlos, what the hell is this?" Her voice was strained, the confident businesswoman replaced by someone who just discovered they'd been walking through a minefield. "Intellectual property protection," I said calmly. "Something you should have researched before taking over a business you didn't understand. You can't do this. Those recipes are part of the business." "Actually, they're not. They're patented innovations that I developed and filed separately from any business entity. Check with your lawyers." There was a long pause. "How much do you want?" "For licensing the recipes?" $200,000 annually, plus back fees for the 3 weeks you've been using them without authorization." $200,000? That's insane. That's what happens when you steal someone's life work and try to profit from it without permission. I could hear papers rustling in the background. There has to be some way to work this out. We're family. Family doesn't forge documents and steal businesses from each other. "Carlos, please. The trucks are failing without the real recipes. We're losing customers every day." That much was true. According to my sources, daily revenue had dropped by 40% as word spread that the food quality had declined. Food truck customers were intensely loyal, but only as long as the product remained consistent. "Then you'd better figure out how to make your own recipes," I said, "because mine aren't available to you anymore." I hung up and returned to the work I'd been doing since leaving Hermanos, developing a new food truck concept that would make my sister's operation look like amateur hour. The next few weeks played out exactly as I'd expected. Isabella tried hiring new chefs to recreate my recipes, but they were working without the patent documentation that detailed the precise techniques. They could approximate the flavors, but they couldn't replicate the complexity that had made Hermanos special. Customer complaints escalated to negative Yelp reviews. The food blogger who'd helped launch our reputation wrote a scathing piece titled "The Fall of Hermanos: When Good Food Goes Bad." Derek Chen published a follow-up review that basically served as an obituary for what had been his favorite food truck operation. Meanwhile, I was quietly assembling the team for my new venture. I reached out to the 3 experienced cooks Isabella had fired, offering them positions at significantly higher wages. I contacted our former suppliers, many of whom had been frustrated by Isabella's attempts to cut costs by compromising quality. Most importantly, I filed patents on 12 new recipes I'd developed during my forced hiatus, innovations that would define the next generation of authentic Mexican street food. The call I'd been expecting came on a Friday evening. Isabella's voice was different now, smaller, defeated. "Carlos, I need help." "What kind of help?" "The business is failing. We're hemorrhaging money. I made a mistake." I sat in my new commercial kitchen, a space I'd leased in preparation for launching my new operation. Around me were the tools and ingredients for recipes that would soon make Isabella's stolen business obsolete. "What do you want from me?" "I want to make this right. Give you back control of Hermanos. We can go back to being partners." 50-50 partners?" I asked. "Yes, like it was supposed to be." I was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. Isabella had destroyed 3 months of business relationships, damaged the reputation I'd spent years building, and proven she couldn't be trusted with anything more complicated than a microwave. I'm not interested, I said finally. Carlos, please. I'll do anything. The lawyers are saying we owe hundreds of thousands in patent fees. The customers are gone. The trucks are sitting empty. Then sell them. Who's going to buy food trucks that can't serve food? It was a fair question. Without access to my recipes, Isabella owned 7 expensive vehicles that couldn't generate revenue. She'd created her own elaborate trap and walked directly into it. That's not my problem anymore, I said. 2 weeks later, I received a notification that Hermanos Food Trucks LLC had filed for bankruptcy. Isabella had lost everything: the trucks, the commissary kitchens, the customer database she thought was so valuable. The bankruptcy court would liquidate the assets to pay creditors, and Isabella would be left with nothing but the legal bills from her failed theft. The final irony came when my new venture, Corazon Street Kitchen, purchased 3 of the Hermanos trucks at the bankruptcy auction for 30 cents on the dollar. I painted them in my new colors, deep red with gold accents, and equipped them with the tools needed to serve my next-generation recipes. On opening day, lines formed before we'd even fired up the grills. Word had spread through the food community that Carlos Mendoza was back, and the customers who'd been disappointed by Isabella's poor management were eager to taste authentic Mexican street food again. Derek Chen was among the first customers, ordering one of everything and taking careful notes as he ate. When he finished, he approached the service window where I was working alongside my crew. "It's even better than before," he said simply. "Different recipes," I replied, "but the same commitment to quality." 3 months later, Derek's review ran under the headline, "Phoenix Rising: Carlos Mendoza's Triumphant Return to Lay Street Food." He described Corazon Street Kitchen as what happens when authentic passion meets culinary innovation, and declared my new al pastor recipe a masterpiece of molecular gastronomy adapted for mass service. The review launched us into the stratosphere. Within 6 months, we had a wait list of corporate clients, a catering business that booked solid through the following year, and requests for franchising opportunities from across the country. Isabella never contacted me again. According to mutual acquaintances, she'd moved back in with our parents and was working as a paralegal for a personal injury firm. The law degree that had seemed so impressive when she was stealing my business hadn't prepared her for the realities of intellectual property law or the food service industry. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about her downfall. Then I remembered her words, "You always were the dumb one, Carlos. I got lawyers. You've got grease stains." She'd been half right. I did have grease stains. But I also had something she'd never understood, the knowledge that real success comes from creating value, not stealing it. The patience to protect your innovations before someone tries to take them, and the wisdom to know that family loyalty has to work both ways. A year after Isabella's betrayal, I stood in my new flagship restaurant, a brick-and-mortar location in the Arts District that served as both a showcase for my culinary innovations and the headquarters for what had become a multi-million-dollar food empire. The walls were lined with patents, awards, and photos from the early days when I had served customers from a single borrowed cart. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek Chen, heard through the grapevine that someone's trying to sell a tell-all book about the real story behind Hermanos. Interested in commenting? I smiled and typed back, "No comment necessary. The food speaks for itself." Because in the end, that's what it always came down to. Isabella had thought she could steal a business by forging documents and hiring lawyers. But you can't steal passion, expertise, or the kind of innovation that comes from dedicating your life to perfecting a craft. She'd taken my trucks and my customers, but she'd never understood that those were just the delivery mechanism. The real value was in the knowledge, the recipes, and the commitment to excellence that I carried in my head and my hands. And that no lawyer could ever steal. The last I heard, someone had purchased the old Hermanos name from the bankruptcy court and was trying to restart the business using generic recipes. They lasted 3 months before closing permanently. Meanwhile, Corazon Street Kitchen continued to grow, not through theft or shortcuts, but through the same principles that had built Hermanos originally: authentic flavors, innovative techniques, and the understanding that success in the food business comes from respecting both the ingredients and the customers. I never saw Isabella again, but sometimes I caught glimpses of her in the mistakes made by other entrepreneurs who confused taking with building, who thought legal maneuvers could replace competence, and who discovered too late that grease stains are often the mark of someone who understands value in ways that lawyers never will.